Mr. Speaker, I rise today to again call for an end to the terrible redistricting war that is cascading across the country, with a domino effect going from one state to the next. States throwing out their entire congressional map, upending representation in their state. It is something that is deeply unpopular with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and is deeply unpopular with the American people. Gerrymandering is bad enough, but throwing out the maps specifically to gerrymander in the middle of the decade is even worse. At this point in time, we have seen Texas and California both adopt gerrymandered maps, although both states now find their new maps being challenged in federal court, which adds yet another element of uncertainty for representatives and constituents alike. But it's gone far beyond California and Texas. We now have, we are now seeing states either already or in the process of starting to adopt new maps in states like Missouri and potentially Indiana and Kansas and Florida perhaps, as well as Virginia or Illinois or Maryland and several others. It seems hardly any state will be spared. And many that have said they wanted to simply don't have time this year, so they're waiting to do it until the next cycle. It's gotten completely out of hand. It's gotten to the point where we could get into this world of rolling redistricting, where district lines are never settled for more than a couple of years, where the connection between voters and representatives is continually being severed. So I have called time and again for an end to this redistricting war, for an armistice. And the fact of the matter is that there still is an opportunity to do that. But it's a very narrow window of opportunity that exists. My bill, H.R. 4889, would bar mid-decade redistricting in every state in the country. And this makes sense as an act of Congress under our Article I Election Clause authority, but it makes sense in particular because redistricting itself is a creation of the Constitution, of the federal government, which says that it has to be done every 10 years. And it's only a new phenomenon, a fairly recent phenomenon, where states are deciding to do it more frequently than that. So we can, as a House, pass this measure. And I believe if it were brought to the floor, it would pass overwhelmingly to stop this madness in every state in the country. And the reason I say it's a narrow window is because the filing deadline in Texas is coming up on December 8th. And realistically, nothing that we do here would affect the map in that state after that point in time. So that is really effectively the deadline for a national solution to this problem. Even if, by the way, that deadline were to pass and Texas or California could not be affected, I still think we should move forward to spare these other states from having to deal with the adverse consequences. But I am again today calling upon the Speaker of the House to bring this bill to the floor for a vote so we could end this madness. We can stop mid-decade gerrymandering. We could go back to the way it's supposed to be, where we redraw district lines once every 10 years. And we could focus all of the time and energy and resources being put into this fight, which, by the way, it seems is not even going to help one party or the other to any significant degree. It's probably all going to be more or less a wash, but we can get back to focusing on the issues that actually matter to the American people. Mr. Speaker, last week, Governor Gavin Newsom's chief of staff was indicted for 23 felony counts in a federal corruption investigation. This is his former chief of staff. She left the office at the end of last year. The charges include conspiracy to commit bank wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States and obstruct justice, subscribing to false tax returns, making false statements to the FBI. The main conduct being alleged involves theft of campaign funds totaling $225,000, tax fraud, as well as fraud surrounding a PPP loan. The indictment lists a number of co-conspirators, including the former chief of staff for California's Attorney General, including a high-powered lobbyist, including another well-known consultant, as well as a number of other unnamed co-conspirators. So in other words, these are the people running our state government in California. These are the people who control our politics in California. Now, I have spoken about a culture of corruption that exists in Sacramento. And this latest series of events has cast that culture of corruption in stark relief. Indeed, the former chief of staff or communications director for both Jerry Brown and Dianne Feinstein used those very words in the aftermath of this indictment to describe the area that he had worked for many, many years, a culture of corruption. He referred to Governor Newsom's chief of staff, who's now been indicted, as, quote, a mafia boss. So I think it's important for people to take note of what has transpired, because it does cast a light on the corruption that is endemic to politics in Sacramento. And I believe that this is really the core issue when you look at why California has declined as a state, why our quality of life has declined as a state, why we pay the highest gas taxes yet drive over the deepest potholes, why we spend tens of billions of dollars on a high-speed train and yet absolutely nothing gets built, why we spend more and more and more money on education every year, yet we have the highest illiteracy rate in the state. The fundamental issue is not Democrat versus Republican even. It is the people of our state versus this entrenched and corrupt political class. And so I do believe that in order to get our state back on track, we need to reform the way politics and government are done in California. And I believe we are actually on our way to starting to do that, not only with examples of people being held accountable, as with this indictment, but also with the coalition for common sense that you see forming across California. The same coalition, for example, that came together last year to defeat our political establishment and pass Prop 36 to make crime illegal again in California by an overwhelming margin, 68% of the vote in that election. So I do believe that there is a coalition of people who care about California and want to reform our state and want to restore sanity and good government and common sense. And hopefully this latest truly troubling, horrifying example will help to speed that process along in a very healthy way. Mr. Speaker, today I voted for, and the House passed, the Refinery Act. This is an important piece of legislation that's designed to identify obstacles to expanding refining capacity in the United States. It's designed to promote energy independence. And before going through exactly what the bill does, I wanted to make clear why this is so important for those of us in California. Because California is seeing the closure of two of its refineries, Phillips 66 and Valero, representing a significant chunk of our state's overall refining capacity. Now, we already pay the highest gas prices of any state in the country. We also have electricity prices that have gone up by 34% over the last several years. The New York Times just reported far more than in any other state. But we pay the highest gas prices out of all 50 states, substantially more than the national average, higher even than Hawaii, which is an island state. And the causes of that are well understood, and it is those very causes that are now causing these refineries to close in a way that is going to make the problem even worse by further constraining supply. The reason, of course, the causes is the taxes, the regulations, the particular fuel blend that's required, the continually changing environmental mandates that cause the cost of doing business to continually grow, that require these refineries to continually update their equipment in a way that makes doing business just no longer viable. All of these things together led researchers at USC to determine that by the end of next year, Californians could be paying an average of $8 a gallon for gasoline. So the bill we passed today here in Congress, in the House of Representatives, will help with this because in addition to the data collection that it requires and the aspects of it that seek to support an agenda designed to promote energy independence through getting rid of needless regulations, it also is looking at state actions that are contributing to our decline in refining capacity. And California, I'm sure, will be the state where the most such actions are identified. And I'm looking forward to the results of this and then being able to act to use whatever levers we have here at the federal level to try to spare Californians from the continually rising cost of gasoline and to restore a little dose of common sense to our state's energy policy. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, California's nonpartisan legislative analyst revealed that the state has an $18 billion deficit. $18 billion deficit. The nonpartisan legislative analyst noted that this is the fourth straight year that the state has had budget problems, even though revenue has been increasing. The LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, also noted in their report on the state budget that the state's economy is not in good shape. Indeed, job growth this year has amounted to zero, nothing. There has literally been no job growth in the state of California. In addition, consumers in California are increasingly pessimistic about our state's economy. So these problems have all been building and building and building, and have in particular accelerated during the governorship of Gavin Newsom. In his first year as governor, our state budget was $208 billion. Now the budget is $322 billion. So it is increased by a factor of more than 50%. And can Californians say they're getting 50% more for their tax dollars? Of course not. The problems in our state have continued to grow. We continue to lead the nation in homelessness, in unemployment, in taxes, in regulations, in poverty. So I would hope that this latest report from the legislative analysts will be a wake-up call for the politicians in Sacramento that we need to start doing things differently. We need to have less of a tax and regulatory burden. We need to support small businesses and workers. We need to get the budget under control so we don't continue to spend more and more as we get less and less. Mr. Speaker, this is the first opportunity I've had to address the House since the passage of Prop 50 in California to gerrymander our state and return us to the era of political gerrymandering. Now, of course, I was against the proposition, and because I'm against gerrymandering everywhere. I'm against it in California, I'm against it in Texas, I'm against it in every state, Republican or Democrat. And my district, the currently drawn 3rd Congressional District, did indeed vote against Prop 50, and if it had its way, it would remain one contiguous district. Unfortunately, this was not decided on a district-by-district basis, so it must be acknowledged that the people of California have spoken. And even though there is ongoing a federal challenge to the new map, I'm proceeding under the assumption that that new map will govern the elections in 2026. But I did want to point to one particular provision in Prop 50 that I actually support. And indeed, I think this is a good part of the reason why it passed, because they actually put this provision, this sentence, right there in the description that people saw on the ballot when they voted, which is the proposition established a state policy of supporting independent redistricting nationwide. And while it, on the one hand, brings back gerrymandering in California, it, on the other hand, calls upon Congress to establish independent redistricting commissions in every state in the country. So I'm going to answer that call to action from the voters of our state. I am currently working on legislation to do precisely what the initiative calls for, to establish independent redistricting in every state in the country. And it will be modeled on the Independent Redistricting Commission that Prop 50 just pushed aside in California. So that if we can get this passed here in Congress and signed into law, then by the time of the next census in 2030, when states are actually supposed to be redrawing district lines, the horrible scourge of gerrymandering, this scourge on our democracy, will finally be put to an end in the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.